Welcome to the Creative Push, an intimate and diverse artist interview series. Here, artists and makers of all kinds share tips, advice, knowledge, and inspiration that you can learn from. I'm your host, Sherry O'Neill, a photographer, artist, writer, and educator. This series is a part of the Learn and Create platform to help artists further their education in creativity, art, and business. Welcome to the Creative Push. Today I have John Archer of Dos Hombres Cycle out of Ocala, Florida. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Sherry.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood and how you got interested in bikes.
Well, I've been riding motorcycles for 52 years. I got my first bike when I was 8 years old, even though I had mini bikes before that. One of my first memories is riding on the gas tank of my dad's Harley around San Francisco in the Bay Area. Things were pretty different then. That's the kind of stuff you'd go to jail for now for child abuse. But he would set me up there with a huge pair of goofy aviator sunglasses and ride me all around the Bay Area. We lived in California until I was in my teens and kept getting more and more motorcycles. My cousins, who were older than I am, were both heavily into motorcycles, and I idolized both of them being older than me, and so anything that Bill and Jim do, I had to make sure that I could do as well. So from there, we moved to the South when I was in high school, and I finished high school, went on to college, University of Arkansas, Woo Pig Sooie, started building motorcycles while I was part of a like-minded social group. And at that time, things were pretty different. This was the late 70s and early 80s. And what we did, we weren't vogue like it is today. Being able to build a bike and maintain a bike was a necessity. It was, just a requirement. And if you couldn't do it when you couldn't hang, you wouldn't be part of the organization. From there, I came to Florida after bumming around the country for about a year and a half on my bike and started building bikes here probably in the mid-'80s. And my best friend and I, Richard Reed, started Dos Hombres Cycle in about 1992. And we're in the same location for 29 years building bikes. I have no idea how many motorcycles that I've built, not a clue actually. And it's kind of cool when I'm somewhere, especially several states away, and I recognize a bike that I've built, years before, and it's still on the road. It's kind of, I don't know, it's nostalgic, and it's like, extending my legacy all at the same time. Recently, I've scaled way down. I'm being more selective on what I do, and I've moved to a different location.
When you were a teenager and you were riding bikes, were you customizing back then, or were you just kind of tinkering and fixing those bikes that you had?
It's funny to think about. I was breaking a lot of stuff. Yeah, I tore up a lot of motorcycles. When I was younger and riding bikes, I started riding on the street when I was 14 years old. I tore up a lot of motorcycles. And when I think back on the shade tree things I did to keep them on the road, how actually dangerous it was, it's kind of comical to me. But you're young and you're bulletproof, and stitches heal up in a month and you keep going.
Did you go to school for any kind of college background?
Well, I went to civil engineering school. That really doesn't have anything to do with anything mechanical. And like I said, when I was riding in the late 70s and early 80s, I rode with a lot of guys that helped show me what to do. And over the years, I've been exposed to some unbelievably good mechanics. A lot of them aren't with us anymore. The few that are, it's really nice to have them around and pick their brain. Tommy Bayman. Yeah, it's I never really did anything like that. I did at one point in time, though, with two other guys, teach a deal called Chopper College, where in 3 days we showed you the basics of bike building.
And what year was that?
Probably around 98, 99.
Was that in Ocala, or was that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we would travel around and to different venues, and people would pay way too much money to spend 3 days, watching us drink beer and build motorcycles. But Yeah, it was kind of a neat gig. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that for a bit.
Tell me about your company, Dos Hombres Cycle.
Richard Reed and I started building bikes. The first bike we built was actually a 47 knuckle. And when we were through building it, we were like, well, we needed a name. And we came up with that. And over the years, I've worked with a bunch of different people there, Richard, Ronnie, and Roger. And in the past few months, I lost Richard. He passed away in October. And it changed everything as far as the dynamic and what I want to do. When I said I want to be selective, it's more than that. I don't want to build anything that doesn't turn me on. There's a lot of fads out there now. The big wheel dresser craze with nutty stereos and painted like an Easter egg that does absolutely nothing for me. And it's funny though, with bikes right now, a lot of the stuff that was cool in the 60s and 70s are coming around again. And it's a lot like fashion, I guess. All those guys that threw away all their old chopper parts in the early 80s, like me, are regretting it now because it just brings ridiculous money online.
What is the one thing you wish you had known when you got started?
I think probably how heavily it was going to affect my life and the decisions I made. I'm not saying that I would do anything differently, but I think I would have viewed very special times differently and appreciated how golden they were.
When it comes to the builds themselves, is there anything that you wish you had learned early on?
Well, there was some trial and error. I would dream up something and two pieces or components that weren't supposed to work together, and I'd go to great lengths to make them work together. And when it was all said and done, sometimes you're a hero and sometimes you're a zero. So there was some things that I tried that simply didn't work that I would spend way, way, way too much time on. But you live and you learn.
What would you say was your biggest failure in building a bike?
We had a guy bring us a Triumph one time. I cut my teeth on British bikes. I absolutely could not get this thing right. It drove me crazy. It is the only motorcycle that I have sent away that was not under its own power. But it had reached the point where, I thought I was going to have some professional help mentally because the thing was driving me absolutely nuts. Everything I touched on it, it would either break or fail or buy new parts that, were bad out of the box and so on and so forth. And I finally just told this guy, just come get this thing and get it away from me. I never want to see it again. The only bike I've never watched anybody ride away on was that bike.
So, would you say most of your experience with building a bike from scratch, basically, would be trial and error and self taught?
Yeah, and like I said before, the motorcycle community, it's different now than when I first started doing this. And I've got a lot of friends that I'll rely on, Richard Barner, people like that if I run across something that kind of stumps me, I'll call them up or they'll be sure and tell me where I'm screwing up at, trust me.
And what's the collaboration when someone comes to you and wants a custom build? Where do you start with that? Do they give you pictures? Do they rely on you for the whole process, or how does that work?
Yeah, normally people will see something online or see something at a bike show or see something that I previously built. They'll be interested in duplicating it to a certain extent or putting their own twist on it. I've had people come to me in the past though wanting me to build bikes that I absolutely wouldn't build for them. Not only because they were stupid, but mostly I was worried about people getting hurt on it. Crazy long hand shift motorcycles that people see some guy riding and they think that they're going to be able to hop right on it after they've got maybe 6 months of experience or something. And I just won't do it. I won't butcher anything. If somebody brings me an original bike, as far as paint and everything, I won't destroy that. It's only original once. And, if you bring me a bike, regardless of the condition or anything, if it's the way it, left, I really don't want to screw with it. But it's getting where there's very, very few bikes like that out there.
So there are authentic Harleys 90% of the time, but you customize everything from the gas tank shape to the gear shift?
Yeah, it kind of depends on what you're after. Right now, everybody is going towards a more traditional patinaed bobber look, which is cool. I really dig that for a couple reasons. One, the tradition of it, it's what this is all about. And the other thing is you can ride them. Yeah, I mentioned before, these people build these crazy dressers that sit, an inch off the ground, and you're taking a perfectly good touring motorcycle and destroying it. And they dump crazy amounts of money into it. I mean, you could buy a really nice house for what a lot of these guys spend on these motorcycles, and they're destroying the value of it. So I definitely don't want to take an old bike, a vintage bike, which is pretty much what I do, and molest it, destroy it. I just won't do it.
So you're really selective with who you choose to work with as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of an asshole about it. Yeah, I turn a lot of people away.
Tell me a little bit about your technique.
The way I usually do it is I'll get some idea, of what somebody wants. I'll put a little input in it. A lot of times we look for a donor bike or just parts. We'll go from there. I'll mock a motorcycle completely up, sometimes to the point where it's running. But normally, I've been doing this long enough. I can tell what's going to work and what's not going to work without actually firing it up. Then I'll rip it all apart. We do all the painting and powder coating and plating and so on and so forth, and then it goes back together. The whole reason for that is otherwise you're going to run into some problems, run into any kind of clearance or fitment issues that you'll end up repainting a lot of stuff.
So you even take into consideration the length of a person's arms and their height and all that with shorter arm spans and things like that, so it's comfortable.
Yeah. Several years ago, we built a motorcycle for a mutant, and the whole thing was stretched, all of it. I think he's like 6'8" maybe, and we had to accommodate his stature, his physique. It was really hard to test ride the thing. I was stretched across it like a rubber band. And we go the other way too. I've built bikes for a lot smaller people, and I like doing that. I get a kick out of doing that actually. I've built a lot of bikes for smaller people that they're comfortable on and they're not intimidated by it, which is the big thing. You don't want to be scared of what you're riding, or feel that you're gonna pull in somewhere and not be able to turn it around, or drop it in the sand, or something dopey like that. You want to make sure that people are comfortable with what they're on.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. I hope you're enjoying the Creative Push. These artist interviews are a labor of love, but it sure would help if you'd consider supporting this podcast with a small monthly donation to help sustain the work and time it takes for me to produce future episodes. You can click the support button, or you can click the link below in the show notes. Any support is greatly appreciated, and you can cancel at any time. Either way, I'm glad to have you here. Please subscribe and share. Now let's get back to the show. What's the strangest thing you've put on a bike or customized onto a bike?
A credit card ignition, an ignition switch that worked off a credit card. And as you slid it through the reader, just like you see at any store, it would trigger the ignition. The whole thing was fake. All it was a toggle switch in there that the card would run across, and when you turned it off, it would run across it the other way. But
would any card work in it?
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah, but he had a special card. That was probably one of the strangest things. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun to make. It was pretty cool. And when you ran it through there, a little LED light came on. You're like, yeah, I'm ready to go.
How do you come up with the color choices and the style of paint job? Is that also a collaboration between you and the buyer and the paint person?
Pretty much. And I try to encourage people not to paint their frames any crazy colors. If you change your mind down the line and you wanted a different color, you got to completely disassemble the bike. But the other thing is it affects the resale value. If you build a bright yellow motorcycle with a yellow frame, you're going to have a difficult time getting rid of it unless you find somebody that really likes yellow. And so that's one of the things I kind of discourage. Plus, if you use a lighter color on any kind of chassis component or anything like that, it just shows all the crud and the leaks and so on and so forth. Because these things leak. It's the nature of the business. Older bikes are designed to leak. That's how they're made. So you've got to appreciate that.
Where do you find your parts?
I find a lot of parts from a good friend of mine in town, Richard. I'll find parts from swap meets and so on and so forth. But it's interesting that over the years that people have come up and offered me parts that they don't even know what they are. If I find something, that I think I can use in the future, I always grab it and stash it away. But since I've moved to this location, I've gotten rid of literally tons of stuff that I simply didn't feel like moving or I didn't think I would ever use.
How long has Dos Hombres been making bikes?
92.
92. And you've been in several magazines. And
I have, yeah. Yeah, I've been in a few.
can you name some of the magazines?
Well, I was in Cycle Source and Easy Rider, and Outlaw Biker.
You were also on a TV show, I believe.
I was on a TV show. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
What was that?
I'd rather not say.
Okay. All right. Okay. What does creativity mean to you?
There's a lot of times when I look at something and I think, if it was this way or if it functioned in this manner, then not only would it change the look, but it would change the entire dynamic of how it works. Creativity to me is being able to look beyond what someone else has done to either improve it or make it your own. And that includes, something completely from scratch. There's really no new inventions in the world. If you think about it, in the past 100 years, a telephone's a telephone, whether it's hanging on your wall or it's in your pocket. A TV is a TV. There's been no great innovations as far as inventions go. And so basically what everybody does in the entire world is improve upon ideas that are already there.
What inspires you to create?
Boredom. I just feel like I feel the need. If I'm not doing something all the time, it drives me crazy. And I'll wake up in the middle of the night and lay there and think about something, and literally all night long. I build stuff in my mind, and once I do that, I've got to see it, And a lot of times what's really rewarding as far as the creativity end of it is to see it in my mind and then actually touch it, ride it, feel it,
How many bikes do you have?
I'm down a few. I'm down to 9.
And have you custom all those?
No, not all of them. Some of them are, I leave alone.
And you collect not just Harleys, but you also have some scooters and some other things, right?
I've got a 1930 Ford hot rod that I built several years ago, and I'm working on a 1949 Dodge truck. And in 1949, a Dodge truck was ugly, and in 70 years, it has not gotten any better. It's a really ugly truck. Yeah, I enjoy doing that, and I love sailing, which is kind of a oxymoron to this whole motorcycle thing.
How do you find people to come and hire you? Is it just word of mouth?
I never have. They always come to me. I've never advertised, nothing. For years, I didn't have business cards. People would hunt me down.
Do you have a website?
No.
So you just use Instagram?
Yeah, well, I do, and even then, it's kind of just fun for me. I put a lot of really stupid stuff out there.
Now, do you see yourself ever retiring from building bikes?
Probably not. I mean, even for myself, I'll probably always do it. I mean, if I'm physically able. I'm getting older and I'm a little banged up.
Tell us about that. How many motorcycle accidents have you had?
I had one really bad one, laid me up for about 6 months, changed the way my face looked.
And what happened?
I had a girl that decided I was going too fast, I guess, and she pulled out in front of me and I T-boned her. I was in the hospital for quite a while, had to have my face reconstructed and my hand put back together. And I've had some other spills.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 39. And I've had some other, broken bones and some holes punched in me and stuff like that.
Did that change the way you ride?
Changed my life. That and losing my best friend in 95 changed my life. I was a little bit off the rails. And not so much the totality of it, more along the lines of what you may miss, all the things you can do. It changes the way you look at things. And since the accident in 99, I'm not going to say that I ride any different, because I really don't. I mean, it's, if you look at long-haul truckers and they drive 1 million miles, sooner or later something's going to happen. And when you've ridden a motorcycle as long as I have and as many miles as I had, sooner or later something's going to happen. It's just the nature of the beast. And if it happens to you in a car, you don't quit riding in a car. You make your own choices. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I can understand that. What's your fondest memory on a bike or trip or experience?
I rode to Alaska, which was an amazing trip, but I had stopped in Prince Rupert because doing all the planning I do, I didn't bring any Canadian money, so I didn't have any loonies. So I stopped at a bank in Prince Rupert. My bike's sitting out front, it's all packed down. And the teller, says, "Oh, you're riding to Alaska?" And I was like, "Yeah, And she said, "Well, if you're camping, you can camp at my family's homestead." And she gave me some kind of rough directions on how to get there. And it was still a couple days out, from where I was at. The next day, as I was riding along, I started recognizing, some of the landmarks she called for. And it was getting kind of late in the day, and I thought, I'm going to do that. So I cut off the Alaskan Highway, wound up this gravel road. On top of this hill was an old homestead where the fireplace was there and everything. And this time of year, it gets twilight. It doesn't, get really dark. But I set up my tent and crashed, After riding all day, you usually sleep pretty good in a tent. But in the morning when I got up, the sun was coming up and I could look down the valley a mile below me and you could see a whole herd of caribou moving down through there. And I thought, man, how cool to live here, how cool to grow up here and see this. And it was just a fluke that she offered this place to me. I would love to know her name just to thank her for it, because that whole day, it was amazing.
What do you do when you get stuck with a creative project?
I work on something else for a while. I'll fall back and work on something. And, there's times you have to abandon stuff. It's simply not going to work. There's other times that if I take a break and walk away from it for a while, I'll usually come up with something. And most of the time I have my best ideas when I'm out riding anyway. Something will pop in my head.
What do you see in your future?
More of the same, but at a slower pace without a urgent need to try to please people that I'm doing things for. If you can't live in my time frame, screw you. I'm just gonna do what I want to do.
And how long does it take you to complete a project usually?
It varies. If I've got everything in front of me, I can build a bike easily in 3 weeks. And like I said, a lot of times you'll get components that don't work together, or I'll screw something up, break something.
You have to figure the dynamics out.
Yeah.
What's the longest build you've ever done?
3 years.
3 years. And what was that?
It was Richard Reed's bike that was on the cover of Cycle Source magazine that took us 3 years to build. It's kind of an interesting story. It went to a guy in Orlando when he sold it, and then somehow it found its way to England. And several years ago, I got a call from a guy in Seattle that had it. So this thing's been across the pond twice and found its way back here, which is kind of funny to me, I think.
And what year did you finish that?
Oh, man, I want to say it was probably maybe 04, 05.
What is your biggest struggle with building bikes?
Time.
Finding the time, or just time in general?
Just time in general. There's never enough, and that's one of the reasons I want to change my focus and not be so pressured.
Is there anything that you'd like to learn that you haven't learned yet?
I'd like to learn to fly.
You'd like to fly a plane?
Yeah, I'd like to fly an airplane. Although I don't know if anybody would be crazy not to get an airplane with me, but I wouldn't mind to fly.
If you were to offer any advice to someone starting out on this creative path, building custom motorcycles, what kind of advice would you give them?
Don't do it.
And why is that?
Oh, I don't know. To me, it's riding the bikes that's my thing, and the whole building the bikes and the creative end of it is just a sidebar to enjoying riding a motorcycle.
It's just the love of riding that really kind of drives you to create these.
Yeah, it really is. And people that have known me all my life tell you that was my thing as long as I've been on the planet, pretty much.
Where can people find examples of your work?
Google John Archer, Dos Hombres Cycle. There's stuff out there. You can see quite a bit of stuff.
And you put a lot on your Instagram page.
I have been putting a lot on my Instagram page, mostly just to show off on the world's worst show off.
It's been great interviewing you for Creative Push.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you so much for listening. As always, my intention is to offer inspiration that excites you to want to get out there and create something amazing. Be sure to check out some of the other episodes. There's more information below in the show notes, including links to other great stories, tips, and resources. Drop me a message or comment anytime, and I hope that you'll sign up to be a part of this creative tribe.